Hey guys, hope you're doing well. Wanted to come to you with another video about doing research for this short story essay. So if you go back and look at the assignment sheet, I do have it on there that I'm looking for two outside sources for you to include as research for this. I also say on there that I want one of them to be either from the databases or from a book. So I just wanted to give you some advice and some info on how to go about doing research here. Hopefully you looked through those links that I posted under last week's Moodle unit, module, whatever. The ones that I posted on Moodle last week, though, one of them, the first one that said research databases, that one should have taken you to the school's library page with some databases. And then the other one was to MLA with some stuff about citations. So I'm going to talk about both of those things. First of all, with the databases, when you go to that link, you'll notice that there's a lot of databases. Or, if you just go to the Bergen Library page, you can get to the databases. I'm going to give you two that I think should be the ones that really all that you need for this class. The first one is JSTOR, JSTOR. That's probably where I would start. I think that's the one I probably used the most when I was doing research about literature and stuff. And I think there's two of them there. Obviously, the one that says like literature, JSTOR literature, or whatever it says there. So that one's good. And the other one that I would use is ProQuest, PROQUEST, ProQuest. So those are the two databases that I would try to get that one source that I'm asking be from a database. When I say two outside sources, that's not including the books, right? The books do not count. The stories do not count as a source. So I'm looking for two things outside of that. One of which being from these databases, or I think the library has some amount of books that you can access electronically. So either an article from databases or a book for that one. So when you go to JSTOR or ProQuest, it's going to be, just like a search engine like anything else. So use your best skills, like, just like when we're Googling something or whatever, where, you have to make sure you're putting in the best search terms to get the best results that you're looking for. Um, you can try to put in the author's name. You could try to put in the name of the story, depending on what you're looking for. Like you could just Google James Joyce Araby, and something should probably come up. I think most of the stories we're doing are pretty well known and pretty widely written about. So you should be able to find some stuff about them. But so okay, so some things when you're using the databases, like I said, sometimes you need to get creative with the search terms. Like sometimes just the first thing you type in on a search won't give you what you want, right? So don't give up. Try to reword it. Try to use some different words, maybe. You can also try to include the topic. Like if you're writing about gender, that might be something to include. Some of the other things that I would look for, though, because I know research can take a long time, right? So maybe that's the best piece of advice, is that I would start doing this as soon as possible if you haven't already started. Because, yeah, it's really not one of the things that you can speed through. If you wait to the last minute, thinking like, oh, I'll just go and find some research, like it takes a lot longer than that. And there's really, we can only speed it up so much. So some things I think you can do to try to make it faster. Number one, you can look at when things are published. I would say anything published before like 1975 or 1980 is probably not going to be very helpful to us. Unless you want like a primary source that would be from the time period when the stories were written, unless you want to get like some kind of newspaper article from 1920 or something that somebody wrote at the time the stories were written. I can see the value to that. But if you find like some analysis article that's from like 1950, probably not going to be helpful. Unless you're looking for a primary source, something that was written by people who were actually there, I would try to keep it till after like 1980. Because like what people wrote about, the kind of literary studies people were doing, which is very different and probably not helpful. So I would look for the date. I would also look at where things are published. Like every once in a while, when you're looking for an article to write about a piece of art, you might find something that seems good, but then you see that it's published in like the Journal of Business, or like an economics journal or something like that. So if you see that, you might also notice like, hey, this might not actually be what I think it is, because it's in a business journal, and that's not really what I'm writing about. That's not for sure. But again, if we're just trying to narrow it down to not waste time looking at things that aren't going to end up helping us. If there is an abstract, some articles will have a little summary at the beginning that they call an abstract. I would always read that because that'll help you get a good idea of what the article is going to be about before you waste a bunch of time reading it. Obviously, just looking at the titles of the things. Yeah, and like when you start reading an article, you just want to be thinking like, is this the kind of thing that's going to help me? So you don't spend all the time reading it and then realize there's nothing that you can get out of it. Another thing with reading these articles for research, you don't need to find like the exact perfect article. Like you might have like a very exact kind of thing that you would like to find, and maybe you're not finding it. But when you're doing research like this, you only need to use one quote from an essay. So it doesn't have to be like a whole essay that's exactly about the thing that you were looking for. But as long as you can find one quote to use, that counts as a source, right? So even if the article isn't really what you wanted it to be, as long as you can find one quote that you can fit into your essay in some way, that would count as a source. Right, so that's using the databases. Right, like I said, I need at least one source from a database or a book. For the other source, it could be, just the more general stuff that you find on the internet. You want to make sure that it's reliable. You don't want to use like Wikipedia, even though, I generally think Wikipedia is, usually reliable, but other professors are not going to want you to use that, and they're going to get mad at you. So I'm going to say don't use it. um, and usually if you're doing something on Wikipedia, there will be a link to some other site that they got the info from, so you can kind of do it that way. But yeah, you want to try to keep the websites that you've like heard of before. Newspapers, magazines are good. You can go to like a specific newspaper like the New York Times or whatever, and like search through their archives and see if they have something that might help you. Yeah, or like history.com even uh, can be helpful if you need some information on the time period. So yeah, right. Two outside sources, at least one from the databases or from a book. The other one can be just from any website like that. Now, the kind of things to research. So the most obvious thing is that you could look for other people writing about the story that you're writing about. If you're writing about Araby or Evelyn or Dreams, whatever it is, you can try to find other essays about that story, right? And then you can see kind of if you agree or disagree with them. And sometimes, like, I feel like we get this impression, especially in high school, that when we're doing research, we're kind of just looking for people who are saying exactly what we're saying. And then we can be like, I'm right because this person also said the same exact thing as me. And that's not the only way to use it. Even if you find people disagreeing with you, that can be good. Because then you can say, like, look, this person said the opposite thing of me, but actually they're wrong, and here's why. And I think that actually works because then it also gives people sort of a reason to read your essay and like why your essay is important because you're correcting something that somebody else has gotten wrong about the story. So you can look for stuff about the story you're writing about. You can also look for stuff about the topic that you're writing about. So if you guys are writing about gender, or like the time period for this essay. If you're writing about gender, you can just try to find articles about sexism and how it works. You can try to find articles about the time period, about what it was like for women in the 19 teens and 20s and stuff when these stories were written. Or you can just find a general article, like if you're writing about like the issue of like possessive relationships or the issue of like women being forced to having like being forced into like giving themselves up for the family, like we talked about like Evelyn and stuff. If you're writing about either of those topics, you can find an article about that topic itself and then like apply it to the story. So the two types of research really are going to be things other people writing about the same story as you, and essays or articles on kind of the topic that you're doing, whether it's gender or the time period. So those are things you can look for. So I think that makes sense. Please let me know if you have any other questions about how to do the research or what to look for and stuff like that. The other thing that I want to talk about here is citations. I know these are annoying. I know that we hate them, but I'm going to, do my best to help us get used to doing this so that when you get to higher level courses, it'll be, something you're just used to doing. We are using MLA for this class, like I have in the assignment sheet. I know you might use APA or whatever in other classes, but for English classes, we just always use MLA. So that's what we're going to be using. There's two things really that you have to do when it comes to citations. The first one is the in-text citation. So this is whenever you quote from the story or from a source directly. So you have your quotation marks, you give us the quote, you end the quotation marks, and then right after that you're going to have parentheses, the author's last name, so like Joyce maybe, and then the page number, no comma, no period. You don't have to write the word page, just like the last name, Joyce, and then a number, 50, and then close parentheses, period. So I don't know. Maybe I'll try to post an example of this because maybe it's hard to picture that. But it's parentheses, author's last name, page number, parentheses, period. Um, yeah, like I said, no comma or anything. That's something people always want to put a comma after the last author's name. You don't have to do that. For internet articles where there aren't page numbers, you can use the title of the article in quotation marks. So you should still have the author's last name, as long as they give you the author. If you know who the author is, you should still have their last name, and then you would do the title of the article in quotation marks and still inside the parentheses, right? If you don't know who the author is, then you can just go with the title in quotation marks. And that's the in-text citation. Again, every time that you use a quote from an outside source, you should have one of these citations right after it. So this way, if we're thinking about the reader, they can see whatever quote that you have, they're going to wonder where it came from, so then they can see it right there, and then they can go down to your works cited and find out all about the source, which I guess is the next thing, the works cited page. So at the end of your essay, once your essay is over, you should have a separate page. Skip on to a new page. You're going to title it Works Cited, not references or bibliography, but Works Cited, centered in the middle. And then you will have the kind of longer citation, right? So on the link to the MLA, to the Purdue OWL website, which I should say, if you guys aren't familiar with this website, Purdue OWL. It's Purdue, like the college, and then OWL for Online Writing Lab. And that's really like the go-to place for information on any kind of citation. For our purposes, you're going to want to click through to MLA and MLA format and all that. But it has all information that you could need for any class. So on that website, they have one of those generators, where you can type in, you can just paste in like a URL or type in the name of an article or the name of one of our stories, and then it should generate one of those longer works cited citations that go at the end of the page. So that one will have a couple of things. It'll have the author's last name, it'll have the name of the book, it'll have the publisher, it'll have the date. If it's a website, I think it has the URL. So I would just go ahead and put that into one of those generators on the Purdue OWL website, and then you can copy and paste it over onto your works cited page. One thing I will say is make sure that when you're copying and pasting that, that you keep all the format the same. I've made the mistake before of like something being in italics on the actual citation, but then when I copy and paste it, I try to change the font so it matches my font, and then I lose the italics or whatever, or italics usually. So yeah, you just want to make sure that you're keeping it the same when you transfer it from the website onto your works cited page. So again, that's going to go at the very end of the essay, new page, works cited, and you're just going to kind of have them all there. I'm going to post, I think, a sample MLA format essay that has a works cited page and in-text citations and stuff, so you can take a look at it. But yeah, so again, please send me an email. I know the research is hard. I know it's time consuming, but let me know if there's anything else I could do to make it easier for you. I think that's it for now.